In 1975, a man stepped off a military plane in California with $50 to his name. $50. And that wasn't even just his. It was split between him and his wife. Today, the empire he built sprawls across more than 50 acres of Southern California. He has been the landlord to over 1,200 businesses. He built the single most famous landmark in the largest Vietnamese community on the entire planet. And here is the strange part. You have almost certainly walked right past his name and never once knew it. They call him the godfather of Little Saigon. This is Asian Dynasty. And this is the story of the richest Vietnamese family in Westminster, California. A refugee who turned a door-to-door vacuum cleaner route into a kingdom of glass, gold, and concrete. By the end, you will see the one quiet move that turned $50 into an entire town. And it is not the move you think. To understand how big this story really is, you first have to understand the place. Little Saigon in Orange County is the largest Vietnamese community anywhere on Earth, outside of Vietnam itself. Hundreds of thousands of people, thousands of businesses, a whole world packed onto a few square miles of Southern California. And one man built nearly half of it from empty dirt. So who is he? His name is Frank Jao. In Vietnamese, Triệu Như Phát. And he did not start with money. He started with almost nothing. He was born in June of 1949 in the port city of Haiphong in the north of Vietnam. He was the 7th of 11 children. Think about that for a second. 11 children in one family. He was ethnic Chinese with a Vietnamese mother caught between two worlds from the very beginning. When the North fell to communist forces in 1954, his family ran. They moved south to Da Nang, and Frank eventually made his way to Saigon, taking night classes just to get an education. He learned English from a local association, word by word. He enlisted in the military at 17, guarding American troops. He worked as an interpreter for the Marines. He sold for Xerox. He translated for an American aid agency. And by 1975, he was a salesman in Saigon for General Electric. He was a survivor, hustling in every direction at once. But he had no idea the entire world was about to collapse underneath him. In late April of 1975, the end came fast. A contact at the United States Embassy gave Frank a warning. Get to the airport. Now. On April 28th, just 2 days before Saigon fell, Frank and his wife climbed onto a C-130 military transport plane and flew out of the only country they had ever known. He had worked for the Americans. If he stayed, he was in danger. So he left everything behind. When they landed at Camp Pendleton in California, they counted what they had. $50. Between the two of them, that was the entire fortune of the man who would one day be called the Asian Donald Trump. Now here is where most refugee stories slow down. Frank sped up. A local accountant sponsored the couple and they moved into a small apartment in Whittier. Frank needed cash immediately, so he took the first job he could find. He became a door-to-door Kirby vacuum cleaner salesman. Knocking on strangers' doors in a new country, in a language he was still learning, trying to sell heavy vacuums to people who did not want them. He lasted about a month. Then he quit and became a security guard instead. On the side, he taught auto mechanics part-time. And in every spare hour he had, he did something that almost nobody else was doing. He went back to school. He took classes at Coastline College in finance, in real estate, in construction. He was not just trying to survive. He was studying the machine of American wealth, piece by piece, while working 2 jobs. After about a year, he moved to Garden Grove and got his real estate license. And in 1978, he made the leap that changed everything. He stopped selling houses and started building. He founded a commercial real estate company and called it Bridgecreek Development. He had no empire yet. He had an idea, and the idea was about to make him a fortune. Here is where the genius shows up. Back in 1976, Frank had driven all the way up to Chinatown in Los Angeles just to buy Asian groceries, and on that long drive, he had a thought that most people would never have. He realized that thousands of newly arrived Vietnamese refugees in Orange County had nowhere closer to shop. They were all driving for hours. There was a hunger, and there was no place to feed it. A businessman named Harry Wu pushed him further. Round up investors, he said. Buy the cheap, empty land out in Westminster. Nobody wanted it. The lots along a quiet street called Bolsa Avenue were going for almost nothing. To everyone else, it was a dead patch of suburb. To Frank Jao, it was the future downtown of a community that did not exist yet. In 1979, he bought his first retail center on Bolsa Avenue. He found financing from a Chinese investor based all the way in Indonesia, and the center became a hit. By 1981, he was buying up more land along Bolsa. In In 1984, he opened the first Vietnamese strip mall in the area. The bet was working. The empty dirt was turning into money. Then, in 1985, he made his most important partnership. Frank teamed up with a man named Roger Chen. Together, they took a 100,000 square foot industrial park and converted it. And inside the project, Frank called Asian Village. Roger Chen opened the very first 99 Ranch Market. Today, 99 Ranch is one of the biggest Asian supermarket chains in America. It started here, on Frank Jao's land. But all of that was just the warm-up for the crown jewel. In 1986, Frank Jao broke ground on the project that would make him a legend. It cost $15 million to build. And when it opened its doors in 1987, it became the first and largest Vietnamese-American shopping mall in the United States. He gave it an English name to attract everyone, Asian Garden Mall. But to the Vietnamese community, it had a different name, a sacred one, Phuoc Loc Tho. Those three words are the names of three deities: fortune, prosperity, longevity. And out in front of the mall, Frank placed giant statues of those three gods watching over everyone who walked in. Inside, across 2 floors and 160,000 square feet, he packed roughly 300 shops, a food court downstairs serving pho and banh mi, jewelry and gold and luxury upstairs, and tucked on the upper level, a shrine to Quan Vu, the ancient patron saint of business and commerce. Frank Jao did not just build a mall, he built a temple to money and memory. And the people came. By 1987, more than 550 businesses were operating in the surrounding area. Every single weekend, somewhere between 20,000 and 50,000 shoppers poured in. Frank had been right. The hunger was real, and now he owned the place that fed it. Now, we are about halfway through this story, so let me ask you something. Before today, had you ever even heard the name Frank Jao? Drop it in the comments, because almost nobody has. And that is exactly the point. What he did next is the difference between owning a business and owning a kingdom. Then came the moment that sealed his legacy. In 1988, the governor of California himself, George Deukmejian, came down to the mall to officially name the entire business district, and the name they chose was Little Saigon. Here is the twist most people never hear. Frank Jao had actually lobbied to call it something else, Asian Town. He wanted it to feel broader, to pull in every kind of customer. He lost that fight. The community wanted Little Saigon, and Little Saigon it became. But it almost did not matter, because Frank already owned the ground it was built on. By 1992, his company was managing close to $400 million in holdings, including at least 7 shopping centers along Bolsa Avenue alone. By 1997, Frank Jao controlled roughly half of all the retail and office space in Little Saigon. Half. The merchants there had a name for him. They called him the Godfather. The Los Angeles Times and the Orange County Register printed it, the Godfather of Little Saigon. One paper went further and called him the Asian Donald Trump, and the title fit. He had developed more than $400 million of retail, condos, and apartments since the day he started with nothing. He flew to Guangdong, China, every single month in the early 90s, chasing even bigger projects across the ocean. At his peak, his holdings stretched across more than 50 acres. He was landlord to over 1,200 Vietnamese businesses, and his company controlled well over 1.5 million square feet of Southern California. But every empire has the moment it overreaches. For Frank, it came in 1996. He proposed a grand pedestrian bridge to soar over Bolsa Avenue, connecting his 2 malls. 500 feet long, 30 feet wide, decorated with dragons and a pagoda roof, with the words, "Welcome to Little Saigon" for all to see. The price tag was $4 million, but when the design went public, the community revolted. They said the roof, the curves, the whole look was too Chinese, that it did not honor Vietnamese culture. The pressure was so intense that the godfather of Little Saigon was forced to do something he almost never did. He backed down. He scrapped the bridge entirely. Even a king does not own everything. So what does a man like this do once he has built a city? He starts giving it away. In 2005, President George W. Bush appointed Frank Jao as chairman of the Vietnam Education Foundation, sending students between the 2 countries. That same year, Frank and his wife donated $1 million to Coastline College, the very school where he had once taken night classes as a broke refugee. They did it alongside the founders of Lee's Sandwiches, and the new center was named in their honor. He became a founding donor at Harvard. He funded the University of California, Irvine, including a project to record the oral histories of Vietnamese refugees, so the story of people like him would never be lost. And in 2024, Orange County inducted Frank Jao into its Hall of Fame. And the family? The dynasty he and his wife Catherine built? They had 2 daughters born in America. And today, the company is no longer run by Frank. He has stepped back into an advisory role and handed the keys to his daughter, Felicia, who now leads the Bridgecreek Group. The kingdom that started with $50 is now a second-generation family business. So step back and look at the whole pattern, because this is the real lesson, and it is so much simpler than people expect. Frank Jao did not get rich by chasing whatever was already hot. He got rich by buying the thing nobody else wanted, empty dirt in a forgotten corner of Westminster. Then he built the one thing his community desperately needed, and here is the move that turned $50 into an entire town. He did not just open a business inside Little Saigon. He owned the ground that every other business had to stand on. He was not a player in the game. He was the board the game was played on, and that is what real wealth in this country so often looks like. Not the loudest person in the room, not the flashiest car or the biggest mansion. It is the quiet man who sees an empty lot where everyone else sees nothing, who studies finance at night while guarding a building by day, and who has the patience to build something that will still be standing 100 years after he is gone. Frank Jao arrived with $50 and a vacuum cleaner. He leaves behind a homeland rebuilt in concrete and gold, a place where hundreds of thousands of people found their footing in a new country. That is not just being rich. That is being remembered. So now I want to hear from you. Of every dynasty we have covered on this channel, who do you think built the smartest empire from nothing? Tell me in the comments. And if this story moved you, go watch our deep dive on the richest Asian family in another American city, because the pattern you just learned, the secret of owning the ground, shows up again and again. The names change. The playbook never does. This was Asian Dynasty.